Gonna ace it. Good morning, urban mobility innovators. Happy to have you here in wonderful Brno today. And what can we say about urban mobility? The only thing that comes to my mind is that any mode of transport you talk about, somebody hates something about it. Every driver driving here, there's a traffic jam. If you're taking your bicycle, then I'm sure you've had that situation where all of a sudden some car cut you off or there's a pedestrian in front of you. When you're a pedestrian, you're basically at the bottom of the food chain. Everybody hates you and you hate everything, except for if you're in a pedestrian zone, unless there's a guy with a scooter there who just parked it and you're tripping over scooters all the time. So we can really say there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of things that need to change for all of this to work. Now, the problem with this is it's a bunch of moving parts, and you turn one screw and everything else just goes click, 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 and messes it up for everybody else. So unless you have a big, grand plan, nothing's going to work. And that's, at the end of the day, why we're here today. The EIT Urban Mobility has been working on this issue with its 200-plus partner network since 2009. And today, we're going to talk about something where a lot of you are going to go, oh my God. Because one thing, obviously, that borders everything we do is regulation, right? Everybody loves regulations. And I'll tell you what, the funny thing is, if you use the regulation wisely, it can work in your favor. You can use regulation to boost your innovation potential, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Now, today we have two keynote speakers, 10 minutes each, to give us a broad introduction into the topic. After that, we'll have a panel discussion with 4 panelists. During this time, you'll be able to also post questions on Slido. There will eventually be the Slido link and the password on the screen here. And at the end of the panel session, we'll choose a couple questions and pose these to you. But now, without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Maria Tsavachidis, the CEO of EIT Urban Mobility. Maria, can I ask you on the stage, please?
Thank you, Georg.
Thank you, Maria.
Of course, we hope that no one hates pedestrians because we would hate each other, right? So everyone's a pedestrian at some point, or a cyclist, or a driver. So mobility moves us all. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here in Brno, for those of you in the audience today, but also those of you watching online. Thank you for tuning in. This event, as you know, is part of the INNOVEIT Weeks that takes place in 10 different locations across Europe until 11th of October. It is also, of course, a side event of the EU's Urban Mobility Days, which are organized by DG Move, and we will have a great speaker coming up. And we are very happy that we can connect the EU's largest innovation ecosystem of EIT with the largest community of urban mobility, the Urban Mobility Days conference. EIT Urban Mobility and the other 8 knowledge and innovation communities of EIT have been founded to address society's biggest challenges by bringing all actors together to collaborate and to innovate. Now, EIT Urban Mobility was created in 2019, and although it's been only 3.5 years since then, the world has fundamentally changed. Our mission hasn't changed really, so it's been to accelerate the change towards sustainable mobility, livable cities, and that is more important than ever. But since the IPCC reports have declared the climate crisis code red for humanity, we know that we need to accelerate at an even faster pace than we were assuming before. So we have to do less advocacy than we thought, and convincing people that cycling is good, that they have to use less of their cars or don't have a car at all. But actually we need to do much more of the footwork of getting things done, so getting innovative solutions deployed. Transformation, we know, needs to be radical and fast, because incremental is just not good enough anymore, and it's not fast enough. The transport sector, you all know, is the sector where we struggle the most to reduce our carbon footprint. In fact, transport is the only sector where not only have we not managed to reduce emissions, but we have seen a steady increase to this day. And the European Commission has set the course for sustainable mobility with very ambitious targets, emission reduction targets. And the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package is clear on what needs to be done. At least 55% net emissions reductions by 2030. And by 2050, transport emissions will have to be reduced by 90%. And we know, of course, that today, on top of the climate crisis, Europe is going through an energy crisis that puts additional pressure on the transport sector to shift to alternative fuels, but to also limit its energy consumption. And that includes those modes that are very difficult to decarbonize: heavy-duty trucks, maritime transport, aviation, of course. So the stakes are high, and we know that we cannot solve the challenges around decarbonization, around air pollution, around noise, accidents, by doing the same things in the same way. Someone said, insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. I think, well, I hope that we are not insane, although sometimes it seems like we are. So what is needed to do things differently? Well, we know we need to go all electric, we need to increase efficiency of the transport systems, the capacity of public transport, more data sharing across all modes, demand responsive transport, multimodal integration. You know all of these things by heart. So yes, we need to do all of the above. But if we're honest, we knew that already 10 years ago. And if we're honest, most of the technologies and the solutions we need already exist, at least at a prototype stage or a minimal viable product stage, or even market maturity stage. But to bring them to scale, we have to deploy them at an early stage, and we have to deploy them in cities, not in labs, with real users, with real authorities that experience firsthand how do innovative solutions need to be designed, and what is the regulatory framework that they need in order to scale and to create the impact that we want to see. So in other words, we need to change how we innovate. The lean real-life testing approach, that is one element, one core element, but then there are other critical factors, of course. So the common direction, public sector, industry, research and development, they all need to be oriented towards a joint mission and joint goals to be achieved. And of course, we have to pool the funds, the resources, to where the impact is. So putting the money where impact is greatest. Horizon Europe differs from previous research and innovation frameworks in that, and it actually shows a path to how research and innovation must change. An important novelty for this in Horizon Europe are the EU missions. So you might know there are 5 missions in Horizon Europe, and these missions are to bundle activities and mobilize all forces around the biggest challenges of our time and support the development of concrete solutions by 2030. That's adaptation to climate change, cancer, restoring oceans and waters, healthy soils, and this is the most relevant for us, the 100 climate neutral cities, climate neutral and smart cities. So this cities mission will receive 360 million euros in funding under Horizon Europe over the period of this year and next year to support cities to achieve their climate neutrality by 2030. And as EIT and EIT Urban Mobility, we are very proud to be able to be part of that consortium to create this one-stop shop or platform for the cities to support them. And together with Climate Kick, of course, we do that, and you might hear more about the city's mission later on and during the Urban Mobility Days as well. So the missions are important, but also Horizon Europe puts even more focus on strengthening partnerships. And you might have guessed, of course, that one of the main cooperation tools of Horizon Europe is the EIT. So European Institute of Innovation and Technology and its 9 knowledge and innovation communities. And our specific role in innovation is threefold. So first, we train students and professionals with a focus on entrepreneurship and bringing the talent to the business, because what we are not lacking in Europe is excellence in science, excellence in research and engineering. But what we are lacking is to leverage that excellence and translate it into innovative solutions and new companies in the market. Secondly, we help startups to establish and grow faster with acceleration programs, with our own investments, providing access to cities and to pilots in the cities, access to industry partners, and finance, of course. And thirdly, we help deploy innovations in cities, like city pilots that bring together cities, startups, and other companies to deploy and test solutions to specific problems, and do that as fast as 3 or 6 months. With pilots, cities can prepare for procuring innovations, de-risking their investments, and increasing their capacity to innovate. One hot area of innovation that I want to mention, where collaboration in partnerships and ecosystem is crucial, is hydrogen. We are very much welcoming the initiative of the European Commission to create a vibrant hydrogen economy, and we are very keen to contribute to developing pilots for using green hydrogen in transport. Because to accelerate the use of green hydrogen, we have to foremost break the deadlock between low demand, high cost of production, and of course, lack of infrastructure. So by getting started, we can show that things work and we can ignite that virtuous cycle that we've seen in electric mobility, that we've seen in renewable energy, solar and wind power. So, but as mentioned, speed is nothing if innovations are not directed at the right targets. We need ambitious and mandatory targets, and regulation is crucial to give industry and innovators certainty to invest in the right things. And in this respect, I think you will all agree Europe is leading. I mentioned the Fit for 55, but also the alternative fuels, infrastructure regulation, Repower EU plan to accelerate the uptake of green hydrogen, and these are just to name a few. So I'm sure we will hear more on these initiatives during today and also tomorrow at the Urban Mobility Days. I want to express special thanks to our team in the Innovation Hub East for organizing today's event, and I wish us all a very fruitful and inspiring day and day tomorrow that will help us to move the needle towards sustainable mobility together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this excellent introduction into the field. Now, I mentioned regulation a little bit earlier, so I have a question. Who has ever heard of the 10T regulation? Raise your hand. Who's actually read at least half of it? That's what I thought. Now, there's a lot of potential out there in these regulations, because these regulations will be guiding us for the next couple of years. And the person who's I don't want to say at the center, but definitely a driving force behind this, and to some ways has also been called the money man, because innovation without finance is usually a great idea that stays in a closet. So without much further ado, I'd like to welcome on stage Harold Reuters, and he will give us a short introduction on the rest of it. Thank you, Harold.
Georg, thank you very much for your introduction. And Maria, thank you for your keynote to introduce this session held this morning here on the future of sustainable urban mobility by your organization, the EIT for Urban Mobility. I'm very happy that I can be with you in person and at the start of these Urban Mobility Days here in Brno. It has been more than 2 years that we have been in this COVID crisis and we couldn't meet, and meeting in person, despite perhaps looming COVID again, is, I think, really what we need to connect and to be together and to exchange and to have really fruitful urban mobility days here. It is absolutely necessary, because I didn't think when coming here that we would be in a continent where we are now. And indeed, Maria, the insanity is there because we are repeating the mistakes of the past. We are again in a continent that is on war, where I would have thought that I would never see that in my entire life happening. And this is touching us all, because in the end there will be energy crisis, and it might be something very hard over the winter time. And so the change, Maria, cannot be incremental. It has to be really radical. And I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, there will be not enough time to get there. In fact, indeed, there have been changes around for many years, like a decade or two, and we have been failing to implement that. And we have to be honest with ourselves, we are simply too late. In a number of questions, we are too late. We have still a dependence on Russian oil and gas, and we have not been able to address that sufficiently through developing, for instance, green hydrogen, or through developing the electricity change in our societies. And so there is a real work that is ahead of us. And when Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was launching the Green Deal, it was really climate-based. But now this Green Deal call is reinforced by the actuality of things. We cannot do anything else anymore. Of course, we are now pouring money into the energy crisis, trying to help households to survive. But in fact, we should go for the radical change to diminish energy consumption and to really combat it at its roots and not at the short-term crisis that we have. So from the Green Deal, going to climate law, going to the Fit for 55 package and the winter packages, we are now 1 year later, and we see a lot of legislation coming your way. And Georg, you asked me to say a few words on that, so I will do that. I will address briefly the legislative context, but also beyond that, the financing context. And in the legislative context, ladies and gentlemen, we have put forward a very strong urban mobility package last year in December. And in there is a legislative part and a communication and recommendation part. In the legislative part, we have proposed that 424 cities in Europe, which all have 100,000 inhabitants or more, will be under the obligation to implement a SUMP and indicators, SUMI, and having a real multimodal hub for passengers and a multimodal hub for freight, and no longer, as we did for the past 2 decades, work on the basis of best practice and exchange, but really work also on the basis of legislation. And it's going quite well. I can report to you that the working groups that we had with the member states over the past week are delivering. And to my surprise, where urban was always a matter of subsidiarity, it will now be legislated. And I think that will be a benefit to all of us, because there are many more cities than the 425 big ones. In 2050, there will be about 85% of the population living in urban nodes. And so there are many thousands of urban nodes. But I think that these thousands will be helped through the obligation on the 424 big ones, with all that comes with it, funding also included, to make also this change happening. The framework was too free over the past. And as you said, we cannot be there anymore. But of course, we also have a communication and a recommendation. And all the work that you will see in these urban mobility days brings that together. These different communities come together because we need the two. We need the top-down approach with legislation and the grassroots approach also at the same time, where things can nurture beyond the legislative framework. We don't want to close off. We don't want the EIT to say, okay, we have to work within a limited framework. It is an open framework that can innovate and that we have absolutely as a necessity. And we need that for our citizens, because with 85% of people living in urban nodes in the future, already 75 now, we really need to make sure that we have more safety and security, that we have clean air, less CO2 emissions, that we have solutions for electric and hydrogen coming to the cities. So for that, we need a number of tools beyond the legislation. And here we are working on digitalization and innovation. We are working with the mission, and we're working with funding and financing. With regard to digitalization and innovation, you can expect that also there we need to make a step change. It is for years that we are talking about mobility as a service. Everybody is dreaming about the Finnish or the French applications that you can swiftly go to Brno and don't have to look whether you can find the ticket on the ÖBB website or on the Czech Rail website, and how do I come here? It's much too complex. So we are legislating in the second quarter of next year with multimodal digital mobility services. Make a proposal how the providers of these MaaS can work together with the operators. For too long we have been waiting for the sector to come forward. And as you said, Maria, again, we need to make a step change on that. It is linked to data. Everybody is talking about data, and it's always in the United States that they have Google and these solutions. Why can't this be happening, as you said, in Europe? So we are creating a mobility data space that brings together these different sources. There are many such sources of data. If you look at a city like Brno, there is, of course, a wealth of data available through, for instance, traffic lights, variable message signing, the bus fleets that circulate, the tram fleets. What we don't do is connecting them together. So we need to rely on Google to do that for us. I mean, that's not possible. So also there, we will create a mobility data space with a communication in March next year, and we will have legislation on MMTIS, on multimodal traffic information services, to make sure that this can happen, that you can have your grassroots innovators that can dispose of these data and that can innovate, because it's not happening for too long already. And I'm sorry, we have been trying to do that with research money, we have been trying to do that with subsidiarity, and it shows it's not delivering. So we step up our efforts. That has, of course, to be backed also with real indicators, So we'll oblige the cities to have SUMI, Sustainable Urban Mobility Indicators, to make that happening. And we also will work, and I think that is more closely to the work you are doing, Maria, with the EIT, a new mobility tech group that will also see the light to make the, let's say, the connection between your work and what we are doing on our side. You have mentioned the city's mission and the budget for the next 2 years. It is crucial that we have these cities as test beds to implement, because afterwards the 100 cities need to translate to the 424 of the 20 legislation, needs to translate to the thousands that we have. And if I look out of my window in my office, what I see in Brussels is no solar panels on roof, no solutions in public transport, no, I would say, automated and connected vehicles, too few bikes, not enough walking. So there is an enormous world and wealth of things to be done, which should absolutely be happening. And the this climate neutral and smart cities mission indeed is aimed to deliver on that. Again, a connection that can be made between the EIT and this city's mission. And then finally, funding and financing. As Georg said, I am also a man who is holding, in a way, the purse of the Connecting Europe facility. That's true. It's about 25 billion euros. And astonishingly enough, Maria, we do not have enough applications in certain fields to call for this money. Can you imagine? So I am very clearly saying to you and to this audience that please look at the calls that we launched last Tuesday, the 13th of September, which are open until the 18th of January, in which we have priorities like urban, priorities like ITS, priorities that also go into, for instance, alternative fuels, so green hydrogen, electric, that can be of interest to you and to which you can apply. And of course, it's not a one-time off. This call will be repeated next year in the same time frame. So if you are setting up yourselves and it is too short to apply in this round, you can apply next round. And of course, CEF is crucial in making that change that you called for, Maria, happening. But of course, we also have the Horizon Europe funds, and you also can look beyond Horizon Europe and the CEF. There is also, I'm sitting on the board as well, Invest EU, where some of you may want to make certain changes with guarantee instruments. If I look, for instance, what we are doing with the RATP, with the Paris bus company and the metro company, we are doing also quite a lot of things with the Invest EU schemes, because we cannot do everything through grants. We also need to do sometimes through loans that we amplify with our guarantee mechanism. If we want to replace the 5,000 buses of Paris plus all the other thousands into green hydrogen buses or electric buses or biogas buses, we need to work also with those schemes. So I'm calling upon you also to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, and I was pitching you quite a few ideas how you can use all the different instruments, funding sources and legislation. What I see is, as Maria said, ahead of us, a real challenge. I do not expect this winter to be easy, neither the next one. I expect that there will be a real task upon all of us as a community to work on solutions for spending less electricity or to be more, let's say, electricity efficient, and to find good ideas as a community how that can be done through innovative ways, through legislative ways, through financing ways. I hope that this conference here and your part in the conference can nurture those thoughts and can stimulate you to take up those challenges and to make the change happen. I wish you good luck and a very nice conference.
Thank you very much, Harold. Much appreciated. And this perfectly sets the scene. There's money on the table, there's ideas out there, there's questions that need to be tackled. And next, I'd like to invite up our 4 panelists. Please grab your microphone real quick. So was there the Slido link at any time on the thing? Because I didn't see it. Now we have a Slido code. So if you go onto Slido and enter that code, then you can actively participate in this panel debate. Panelists, would you please come upstairs already and take your seats? Careful, it's a bit shaky. You can submit your questions, and those questions will then be selected, and the ones you can actually vote for somebody else's question. So if you have the same question as somebody else, you can upvote that one, and then we can ask the question to our panelists. Now, at the end of the day, urban mobility is something where we all have a little bit of skin in the game. So I want to start my question before we actually start with any formal introduction with, what's the urban mobility innovation that's existing already that you use the most, that you're happiest with, that you would miss the most if it would disappear? And I'd like to start with you, Martina.
So when we are talking...
Can we have the mic from Martina?
Hello? Can you hear me?
What's your number? What's the number of the mic? 14. Mic 4? Yep.
Okay. So when we are talking about the sustainable urban mobility, my first thought would be the last mile deliveries. And something that I cannot live without are parcel lockers. Because vast majority of my shopping I do online, and I use those parcel lockers almost every day. That's the most convenient, the cheapest way, and the most, I can say, ecological. Because in Poland we have like 20,000 of parcel lockers, and it is said that more than half of the adult population of Poles use parcel lockers. So that's the great example of reduction of trips, because in the same time it's the reduction of the CO2 emission. And it is calculated that using parcel lockers instead of door-to-door deliveries reduces CO2 emission to 75%. So, yeah.
That's impressive. There's actually a couple parcel lockers outside. When I walked in, I saw them. Various.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's so popular in here, but in Poland it's a total hit. And I believe it's going to grow.
Super. Gareth, what's your favorite?
Number 5.
5?
It's a bit like the bingo, okay?
Yeah.
We'll shout out some numbers to you. I think for myself, the thing I can't live without is good policy. So I have in my wallet, in Spanish it's called a bono recurrente. From now until December, I can go between my home and work, and it's about 60 kilometers away, and it costs me nothing. So good policy to get us out of our car, to deal with the current emergency, and support reducing greenhouse gas. It's a great policy. I think it's fabulous to see a government decide to act, and in such a sweeping, the whole country, 35 million of us, can travel about 50, 60 kilometers without paying. So I love it. A great policy, makes my life easier.
Is that limited to going to work, or can you go anywhere?
I can go anywhere. I mean, my intent is to go to work, but because it does the 6 districts, I can actually go to the beaches on the north side of Barcelona for free as well. But I must say, the trains are more crowded. I see it every day. And that's great. That's the intent and purpose. So it works. Good policy.
That's an excellent one. Yekaterina.
Yes, I hope you hear me.
What's your number? 2.
Okay, bingo continues, and indeed you hear me much better. For me, it's really car sharing, because I believe we really need to reduce the ownerships of the cars. It really rings a bell when Harald said just in his keynote speech that we need also rethink and reduce the consumption in many different ways. And for me, the car sharing is a way forward, just to having less cars on the street. And for a moment, it's very niche. I find still it's very niche. It's a good way forward because it's very much hybrid, very much green and smart cars. But of course, the real radical innovation will come with the development of artificial intelligence and also autonomous cars. Then I think this kind of no ownerships of the car would really boom. So, and I think we are really coming close to that. And especially now with COVID crisis, with rethinking of our mobility patterns, with the remote teleworking. It's really, I think maybe we do not realize it as we are living in the moment, but we are really now living the radical transformation of our mobility patterns.
Yeah, I really like that, because when I ask people, do they want a car, everyone says, yeah, I want a car. It was like, yeah, but would you prefer a driver? I was like, yeah. And that's when you don't actually want to own the car, you just want to go places. So Tuan, what's your favorite?
Thank you very much. Actually, I would like to continue the idea from Yekaterina's, because my original idea was what fascinates me most is that the application of sharing economies and integrated solution apply to urban mobility. Car sharing is one example. In Budapest, we have also bike sharing. I mean, the sharing of bicycles.
Okay.
So this is similar to that one. And what is more interesting to me is that the integrated solution means the companies behind the bike sharing in Hungary, in Budapest in particular, is the oil company. So they try to change the image. So that's very important. It's very important that where you start and where you want to be. So that is and it's green. It's green in the scene, and it's green inside and outside. I would say that's why I say integrated solution and the application of sharing economy, the economic principles to the particular area of urban mobility. That is what fascinates me.
That is a fascinating one. An oil company is giving you the opportunity to ride a bike for free or for a very low charge and not having the cost of owning a bike. So even reducing the entry barrier. And I think these are the things that we need to see. We really need to see people get out of their comfort zone. You've heard it 100 times, but when an oil company starts renting bikes, you know they're out of their comfort zone. So that was a personal introduction on a personal note, but now obviously we're also here in a professional context. Now, Yekaterina, you're an expert on European innovation ecosystems. I can say that to a certain degree. And you recently spent some time in Berkeley looking at how it's being done in the US. And so from seeing because everyone say, yeah, we need a Silicon Valley here, we need Brno Valley, everybody has a valley now. Nobody has a hilltop, by the way, where you have a better view. Everybody wants to be down in the valley for some reason. How can we bring valleys or hilltops to Europe?
You are very right. And the Commission has been thinking for a while on that we need a new innovation policy in Europe. The last Innovation Union was in 2010, and now we are like 2022, and indeed it's been really the period that many things has happened geopolitically. A lot of different priorities has been set up. And here, with the new European innovation policy, agenda that had been adopted on the 5th of July this year, actually the European Commission put forward different initiatives, indeed, to bring Europe in the forefront on the innovation. We're already leading in science, but we would like also that Europe becomes really the innovation-prone continent. Here, if you speak about the new European Innovation Agenda, there are 25 actions and initiatives, all divided in 5 flagships. And we believe that these flagships were designed together with our stakeholders, and I think every stakeholder, being it startup, industry, research institution, university, or the government, they could find something for themselves.
Okay. Can somebody fix that, please? I mean, this is impossible. Sorry, please.
For example, one of these ambitions is to combat the scaling up gap, the funding gap that still exists, to help the startups to scale up and also exit at the European markets. Another one is the regulatory framework, and here indeed a lot more must be done for experimentations and for promotion for the living labs and for the test beds. The third one is indeed connecting and creating the deep tech regional innovation valleys. And here we come a little bit closer to your question on the Silicon Valleys. We do not want to create one Silicon Valley in Europe. We believe we need to have hubs but well-connected hubs in the different part of the region, in the different part of the countries and regions. And also the regions, we need to bring also regions that are lagging behind. They are still now, we call them emerging and moderate innovations. We need to bring them at par with the strong innovation regions. And finally, we need to address the talents, because again, Silicon Valley, what is the most striking there is the talents that it attracts. So we need to also attract talents from outside of the member states, not only in the member states, but here within Europe, we also need to retain our talents, train and retain. And here EIT plays a very important role, because within this ambition of the new European Innovation Agenda, EIT make a pledge that they will target 1 million deep tech talents in the next few years to train in Europe. I will stop here.
Super. No, that's actually a very nice approach, and I like how you got back to the beginning of Silicon Valley, which basically started with Xerox. Anybody remember Xerox? Yeah, if you're above a certain age, you'll remember Xerox. They had a great innovation team. They let everybody in the house. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs popped in, saw what they were doing, created their companies, and now Xerox is gone. So it's a very interesting evolution that we can see there that we don't want to replicate in that form. The jet has landed. We were trying to recreate the experience of flying for those of you who have missed it and took trains and stuff like that. Yeah, so we did the noise level. Gareth, as a director of EIT Urban Mobility, you do a lot to change what's going on in Europe. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit what your favorite part of the job is there.
Wow, okay. We desperately have a huge obligation to act, and I was very encouraged to the messaging that we've been receiving, which is previous behaviors are not sufficient, have not delivered, and the message that we're working on is bringing innovation to the innovation community. We cannot have the same models, we cannot have the same instruments, we cannot implement those instruments in the same way. We have to know the rules 100% and stick to the rules so that we know when we can change, blend, bring people forward and suggest new ideas. Now, that's our job. Okay, we only have a budget of about 50, 60 million a year. That's not going to change the world, but we can orchestrate. And I think that's the EIT's role, is orchestration of communities. And the experience of the last 3 years has been very positive. I'll just highlight two. One of them is our cities. Okay, our cities often in large projects, you know what it's like. They'll get a phone call 4 days before submission. I need a demonstrator and I'm missing someone in the east or south and I'll give you 50,000, just do what we tell you. And the cities never implement. They demo to death. Why? Because no one has a vested interest in that solution. So when we saw a recurrent problem, we developed a pilot, which the EIT approved to test as a pilot. And we went to cities and sat down and said, tell us your problems. Really simple. And they gave us a list and we said, nah, we can't do that. You don't control that data, we can't do that. But we came up with some real problems. And we published them. We gave money, de-risked it in 2 batches, massive competition, and we got all these wonderful companies stepping up and saying, I'll help you fix problems. Now, instead of a city waiting 2 years for a project they never really needed, you have the city, the mayor, the police department, the head of environmental science and data, sitting down and say, yeah, we want to do that. So when you get the SME going there, the SME is all excited, and it actually infects the local authority. And we've seen, we're getting, I'm not going to tell you how many, but we're getting KPIs for about 1/10 of what we used to do for a KPI as a marketed product. We're getting it for about 1/10 of what we were doing before. And not only that, the cities are buying it because they've influenced its shape. So we're actually making that commercial link. So we had to change. Now it worked in the pilot and now we're scaling up and we're doing it, and we have Tel Aviv here that's doing 3 of them for us. We've got Lisbon, we've got Cascais, we've got Cluj-Napoca, we've got Prague, we've got Bratislava, Riga. Oh my gosh, the list. And that came from how do we fix a problem for our cities? We'll be doing more of that. So watch this space. And in the EIT in Budapest, when we come up with a strange idea, just roll with it for a bit until we do it badly. But there'll be more of those to come. But that's how we're doing the innovation. We have the normal programs, but we're looking elsewhere. Yeah.
I really like that approach. And I've seen that a lot in research projects as well, where if you're not involving end users of your product, then you just don't get funding. If you're doing research I was involved in a border guard project, and we had 4 border guard authorities in the project, and they will tell you what they need at the border, and there's no researchers running around saying, but this would be an interesting research topic. And that really drives and gets the buy-in, and I think that's where we need to go, because the cities are aware of hundreds of innovations out there, but if it doesn't solve the city's problem, then it's a great paper in a great journal, lots of impact points. Thank you. But we actually have an expert who's an expert, I would say, on taking research and bringing it to the ground. So actually the other way around, taking great journal publications and bringing them to the road. Tuan, do you want to give us a short introduction of what you do at the University of Budapest?
Okay, forwards our activities in IT Digital and in Budapest. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. You said as a researcher, yes, I have a research background, and it's Technical University of Budapest. I also graduated from MIT program in the US for digital finance. So basically, that's my part in the research area. But talking about EIT Digital, I would say that, okay, I represent EIT Digital, not only the Budapest node. I would like to take an examples, two examples, very small examples. The first thing is that even that we are not urban mobility, but in EIT Digital, we have 5 focus areas within which you have 2 is related directly to your kick. The first focus that's directly related to is a smart city. So we use deep tech and digital tech to help to provide a solution for the smart cities. I will come back a little bit more on that. The second area is we call deep tech itself, a focus where we focus on AI, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity, and quantum computing. The 3 areas also the focus in the European Commission digital agenda. So that's why we are here. Artificial intelligence, definitely, it's a place that I think is not only our own cake, but all the other cakes, because it relates to data, how to manage data. It's, we already heard one of the previous example in the keynote speaks. I would like to bring another example here. It's one of our, I would say, flagship success story. I would say that Konux example. The Konux is a company based in Munich, and it's an outcome of EIT Digital Accelerator programs. It's founded in 2014, and it has base also in the Silicon Valley. So actually, because EIT Digital, we have a hub in the Silicon Valley, and we help them to get US funding. So that is interesting, because how we do it in Europe is only one thing. You get European investors to invest in Konux, it's one thing. But actually, our hub in the Silicon Valley helped Konux have additional funding from the US. And I am very pleased to say to you that Konux, until now, 2022, has acquired more than 110 million euro in fundings. And that is a company that started with our EIT Digital Accelerator. And that is a company work on smart sensors to monitor the industrial system, and the direct application of that is for the rail industry. In 2022, they have a long-term framework with Deutsche Bahn to monitor their switch systems, which is in the end has a direct effect to our mobility and the way we live. So that is the example I would bring here to you. EIT Digital is quite, I would say, quiet in the background because we work on deep tech. But the applications we are not easy to be seen because we are not directly applied to the world, but we apply through you to the society. So that is from our side, EIT Digital.
Super, thank you, Tuan. That nicely closes a circle because our fourth speaker is Martina, who's an expert in supply chain logistics and recently participated in the 500 Innovators Internship in Stanford. So we keep circling back to the US. I think this is an underlying problem, let's put it that way. I think Harold also said, we can't have the Googles of the world doing this for us. We have to start doing it here. Any suggestions on how we can do that? You and your organization.
Okay, so maybe a few words about Łukasiewicz, because maybe not a lot of you are familiar with our institute. So Łukasiewicz is the third largest research network in Europe. We consist of 26 institutes from the different fields and almost 5,000 researchers and scientists that are working together. And we are working as a Poznań Institute of Technology. We are part of the Łukasiewicz Research Network, and we work both with the business and the researchers in order to be not the inventors, but the innovators. That is something that you just said, that we don't want to just give the ideas. We want those ideas to be implemented in the real world. So that is something that we are doing in the Poznań Institute of Technology. Me as a logistic specialist and in the field of development of new ideas, I work with the business and I listen to them and try to find the solutions for their real problems. And in terms of urban mobility, we are part of the EIT Urban Mobility East Hub, together with the Czech Republic. And we are also the center of the RIS Hub, so the Regional Innovation Scheme, as we are assessed as a moderate innovator, so we still have a lot to do. However, we are open to develop our solutions and our ideas. And working with EIT give us a lot of different possibilities to work with the business because we have our own project called EIT Urban Mobility Hub Poland, where we support business or our municipalities to work together. First of all, our job is to raise the awareness of the EIT because it's not so popular in Poland. We joined its rank in 2020, so it's just not even 2 years. So we still need to raise the awareness of the urban mobility and EIT. So what we do, we conduct webinars where we raise the awareness of the sustainable urban mobility. We conduct trainings and courses for the students. And in terms of Stanford and of 500 Innovators, that is something that we were learning over there, is a design thinking. So that is something that we try to implement at the Polish universities and encourage our students to be more creative, to be more innovative, and to respond to the real problems of the business and municipalities. And what else? We also organize city-tons. So that is kind of a hackathon for the cities, where we, with the scientists and engineers, we are working on the real solutions for the city of Poznań.
Super, thank you. So now it's getting technical, you see, and we're starting to dive really into a lot of issues. And obviously one of the framework conditions that we have is the European Innovation Agenda. And now I have one person listening up. And how can that framework help in achieving a better urban mobility future?
Yes, I would like to tie this new European Innovation Agenda also to the voices of the stakeholders that were heard yesterday at our Innovate event. For example, Smadar Iskovic from Israel gave excellent example of the living labs. I mean, this kind of initiatives, I think we need also to adapt and scale up also in Europe. we feel that we still, although a lot of efforts been done for internal market, we still have a fragmentation. It's not a surprise. We still have very much innovation divide between the countries, between the regions. And we think the solution, one of the solutions that proposed through the European Innovation Agenda, is really focusing on the creation of experimentation spaces. Again, yesterday, Andrea Najavarkova mentioned in the panel that she feels that there is a need for legislators working together with innovators. And this is exactly what we would like to promote through the regulatory sandboxes, particularly in the fields of the finance, of the energy, of the digital, of the transport. We would like really conduct, having the sandboxes to experiment on the new solution and also bring the legislator closer to the innovators to make a regulation that is fit for purpose, fit for innovation, and not the other way around. At the same time, also living labs and the test beds, these are also different types of these experimentation spaces that we think that needs to be promoted in Europe. Another maybe point that I need to emphasize in relation to the mobility, urban mobility, but also the role of the public procurement. Because we know here we are talking about the cities, about municipalities, and it is not a secret that public procurers, they constitute 14% of the all GDP. So they had a huge potential in this potential buying force. And we want them encouraged to buy more innovation procurement, innovative solutions, also from the startups with the potential of the scale-ups. But of course, it's easier said than done, because innovation procurement been also at the market and at the topic, in the topics like for years, and it still doesn't really pick up. And what we hear also from the stakeholders and also from the cities, from municipalities, it's also what is lacking is capacity building, because it's actually it's very hard to approach it without really knowing what has to be done. And of course, with the risk aversion that is also sort of that public sector has, it also needs a little bit the changing mindset to approach these innovative procurement solutions like with more openness. And through this new European Innovation Agenda, for example, we are planning to set the number of advisory centers, advisory bodies to promote and innovation procurement and to build capacity for the buyers, and particularly public buyers, to encourage them to buy innovation.
That reminds me very much of the PPP, the projects in H2020. Where there was also, that was basically a project where an innovation agency would go out and say, I need something that's, or a procurement agency would go out and say, I need something that's not on the market, and then 4 projects would have a year to start building something, and then one of those would then be chosen to really go into the next level. So you're not buying a dream, you're really buying the beginning of implementation, and you can get over this first step where you're saying, well, you know, if I'm not getting it procured, I'm not going to build it, and if I'm not procuring it, if I can't procure it, if I don't know if it exists. So that catch-22 is slowly being aggregated, and I think that's really the way we have to go. We have to have innovation on a public level. And I mean, but in every country, obviously, everybody knows that public procurement is probably the most innovative process ever imagined, right?
Actually, about these PPIs, if I may say, but also we know, also you know as well that the success is very mixed, right? Because it's like really a little bit this instruments, a little bit of hit and miss. So it could be very successful example and maybe not that successful. Sometimes there is also not enough interest on the market or not enough incentive for the market to, you know, to enter into this sort of instrument and how to say, cooperation with the buyers. Mm-hmm. But what I think is important to note is also the role of the national policies and national innovation policies, because again, we have observed that only in 10 member states, the innovation procurement is embedded in the national policies, and then of course it has a spillover effects to the regional and to local policies. And we believe it's very important also this political encouragement from the top, because it makes it easier from on the technical level to promote and to engage in this type of initiatives.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If the procurement agency doesn't have it in its powers to go along this route, then it's very difficult, which brings us back to regulatory constraint in this context. Do you want to add something, Gareth?
Definitely. The problem is public procurement is done by politicians and average citizens who are members of political parties. And I think we sometimes are imposing upon them a perspective. Their job is to be re-elected in 4 years, and they could be a teacher, they could have been a bus driver. We have a job to support them, and I think that's where we can come in. Just to use a little example of how we're trying to change our behaviors because of the new innovation agenda. We are working on hydrogen, okay? We see, as Maria highlighted, passenger hydrogen, probably not going to happen. However, we've got 24% logistics and transport. If we can take some of the burden away, when we can help. But the big issue we have is this hard egg crisis. So low demand, no infrastructure, high cost of production. And it's going round and round and round. And no one is stepping up. And I'm going to say, taking the risk. Innovation is risk. Our public sector, they're risk averse. They're accountable to the public purse. We're lucky in the EIT, for those who don't know. We are co-funded as an entity, and we have Big Brother behind us, but we also have the industry partners, and we can do some interesting stuff. So on hydrogen, we are looking forward to helping cities create a reference point where we will break that cycle, and we will come in with a hydrogen bus, hydrogen car, hydrogen lightweight public vehicle for environmental services, garbage, etc. We'll come in with an autonomous shuttle. We'll have 5 different types of hydrogen vehicles running around cities, plastered with the name, and we'll be doing activities with citizens, educating, bringing public sector there. Why? Because right now, if you buy a public sector-like vehicle, you can get it for about 35,000. The hydrogen version is about 90,000. That's a horrible risk, but until someone does it, until someone puts them on the ground, we're not going to get there. So there's an interesting step that we can play to create a roadmap for cities, empower the local authorities. They can see the model, they can see how it's done, and you know those vehicles won't stay 90,000 forever. But it does take us stepping up and saying, there's a risk, people can't fix it, the local authorities, we shouldn't expect them to. Let's help. And I just want to highlight, go out there, you're going to see a hydrogen bus that's designed in Europe. The components are 95% European. Because of its lightweight, its advanced composite, it can take more weight. And that's from Europe. Now, we don't need to buy foreign products. We need to give these companies chance. So EU Invest, tying up projects, please go and have a look at the bus. And I can see one of our colleagues from Bosch over there who's working with us on the lightweight public sector vehicles as well. So please feel free, come and have a chat. But this should be an example of, we will internalize the new agenda. And my gosh, it's going to be fun. We think it's going to be an absolute ride. It's going to be complex and there'll be problems, but it's going to be fun. And the most important thing is when you're involved in innovation with risk, it actually is very invigorating. Okay? And we want to put that back into the EU programs. Yeah.
I think you already answered my next question, which would have gone to you, which would have been how can we speed up the innovation agenda? So thank you for answering the questions I didn't have to pose. But there is one thing that I sort of want to catch up on, and I'd like Tuan to answer on that. In a lot of projects or a lot of programs, we see that the work is being done, almost in a silo. DG Move doesn't talk to DG Home, things like that, and these things, trickle down almost to the lowest level. Getting 2 projects to cooperate is like asking them to sell their mother. What can we do to improve this process? What can we do to make it more interesting? Is the wrong word, because it is interesting, but how can we intrinsically motivate, let's say, KICs to collaborate more?
Thank you very much for, I mean, very to the point, the questions, because actually I can see that this kind of event is exactly what we need. Because here I can hear the demands as tech provider, EIT Digital is kind of tech provider. You can hear the demand from the other kicks, from the other application area. I can see that, for example, hydrogen is your focus, it's important to society, it's important in many areas, and why we can bring some deep tech to your solution. So that is if I cannot, I will not hear, I cannot understand perfectly because sometimes I read websites, well, but it's not enough. But if something like this is happening, this is very important that we have a kind of communications. We share our concerns and we share our expertise as well. So to understand that who can bring what to the table, because normally nowadays I will say that the multidisciplinary knowledge is needed to solve a problem because we have complex problem and we need complex solutions, require a lot of different fields, both on demands and offering. So that is, I think, particularly this kind of things should be multiplied. I think that we have INNOVEIT weeks, so we have many events, 10 events like that, and I particularly find it very, very useful. So, I mean, more communication, more events like this, so to better understand each other, both on the demand side and the offering side, so we can have a better matching and to solve a common challenge in Europe. May I have one more note on because I was so attracted by your note on public procurement and your note as well, because traditionally, in terms of economics point of view, traditionally, public procurement is risk-averse. Because you work on public money, you don't want to involve risk there. But you said that we need to increase the percentage of public procurement to innovation. And exactly what you said is it's a risky business. And I think that is particularly this conference is all about, and actually by the CEO of Urban Mobility, when you said that policy is useful when we can use it to know where to put our money, I mean, where to invest. So exactly that is the point. It's very challenging to you as from the commissions, how you can balance between risk-averse attitude and the risky business. So what is the meeting? I would say that in game theory, we call it the Nash equilibrium of this situation. So I am very interested in your outcome, your solutions on this issue. It's very difficult, but how to find a Nash equilibrium which is Pareto efficient. We talk about efficiency. It's a line that we cannot push further. So go to the top, go to the point that we cannot push it further. So that is, I would like to comment on this because I think that we are addressing policy here, and exactly that's a procurement between the risky and non-risky businesses. How can we meet both, and how can we push the line to the limit? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue. Always looking at, how much risk can we put into public money? In Austria, we just had the situation that the Viennese electricity provider, which doesn't have any power plants itself, was shorting electricity on the spot market, and it was a bit of a scandal. I think we're 40 billion in exposure right now. We're hoping that the market stabilizes. But this is obviously stuff that you don't want to read about in your newspaper. You want to hear that they leveraged 40 billion for new investments into better. But I think with those, that's definitely a place where we want to go. Going back to your comment about the physical meetings, I do really think that's something that really makes innovation happen. I mean, I come from a project management background, and it used to be at the end of a conference, the last 5 people left at the bar would definitely make a joint project together because you're sort of the leftover gang. And so maybe we can do this tonight too. When we go into groups, try to think of what kind of interactive work could we doing together, and what kind of regulation changes are we looking forward to that can actually help us innovate. And which leads me to the question to you, Martina. The pit is in, you're in a position where regulatory changes affect a lot of the technologies that you're developing. Where are you actively looking at regulatory change to really drive your innovation agenda?
So unfortunately, as a research institute, we are not able to create new regulations. However, we are doing our best to give the biggest impact we can on those regulations. And one of the examples could be our partnership with the ALICE, that is Alliance for Logistic Innovation through Collaboration in Europe. And that is the platform that raised awareness of the logistics innovation. We support European Commission in terms of new innovation in logistics and forcing them, lobbying new regulations connected with those innovations. We are also involved with the ALICE. We are also involved in the Horizon projects where we work together with the business and researchers, and that is something that needs to be emphasized, that a huge part of the ALICE is business. So that is something that, as I mentioned before, all the problems and needs come from the market, and we are trying to solve those problems, and together with them write roadmaps for the logistic development, and also try to implement them in the Horizon projects. And that's the one action that we take. And another thing, in terms of regulations, we also take part in the European projects that are connected to regulations at the local scale. One of the examples could be our Sulpitar project. When we are working, it was an Interreg fund. And we were working with different regions, trying to get all the best practices from different regions. So that is something that I see a great opportunity, as you said, about that regional valleys, because we saw it at our project that it's something great that we can cooperate and implement those best practices into other regions. And we also cooperated with City of Poznań, trying to get all the needs and problems of the citizens and translate it into sustainable urban logistic plan, which was created in the project and then implemented in the city of Poznań. So as you can see, we have some kind of influence on the regulations as well.
Super. That's good to see that it's not a one-way street. Regulation is susceptible to outside knowledge. Now, I want to remind everybody that we're not here talking amongst ourselves, and you're in the listening crowd. Please do participate. Log into Slido, go to the link, enter the code, and then you can participate actively, both here and if you're joining remotely. Now, we keep hearing about regulation, obviously, because that's the topic of the day. And I just had this a slight flash, because I was thinking, if you're looking at great innovations coming from Silicon Valley, and you have Google and Facebook, who had a very interesting approach to copyright law. Then you had Airbnb, which had a very interesting interpretation of zoning laws and use of buildings. And then you had Uber, which was very tricky on the, taxi license, who needs that, and employment law. So there's always this almost, drive towards ignoring regulation for the sake of profit, which leads to examples who say, why don't we have an Uber? Well, because we actually listen to regulation, and that does make sense. We're not exploiting everybody along the line. And when you look at that, so obviously that means we need to, in Europe, do a little bit of an extra effort. And what are the efforts that we can do to get this innovation gap from a great idea to it actually going on the ground without steamrolling regulation and ignoring stuff? How can we better do that in Europe? And I'd actually pose this as a question to the four of you, and see who wants to go first.
The first thing is, I'm going to state a premise. We are not juniors to the Americans, so that I just don't accept this constant reference. I worked for American companies. Cisco, HP, I lobbied with them. I took Microsoft to court when I was at the Commission. Let's not be in awe of these people. Can we stop it? They break the rules. They lobby actively against our social values and our tax rules. Yes, of course, they make profits. Are they paying dividends? Are some of their business models correct? No, they're not. So let's not think we're the juniors here, okay? We are a very well-educated population. We are risk-averse, though. We're comfortable, and that's what we need to change. We need to take some of the risk and make it easier for our very bright kids to learn and grow and to take risks. And some of the legislation we had in Europe on if you go bankrupt is exceptionally punitive. If you're a young kid who wants to set up a company, the rules in Germany, the debt used to follow you for years. In America, you just go, right, I'm off, I'm moving to Virginia, and I'll open a company there with the same name and a different spelling. So we have a completely different opinion on risk-taking. There's nothing wrong with having 2 companies or 3 companies in your background. That's not failure. And I think that's the dynamic that we will make a difference of, is innovating in the new agenda for our young people, changing legislation, but also implementing the legislation that exists. Pay your tax, social services for those delivery logistics payers. Let's put you on an even ground with the corner shop that has to pay local tax and has to pay social welfare and cover holiday and sick leave. So again, we are not, I can't accept the premise of being deferential to them. I just won't. It's not a basis for us to even start our discussion. They're just different.
No, I completely agree. I think the risk averseness is something that we need to work on. Although I hate to talk about this, culture of failure. I wanted a culture of retrying, because it's not about let's fail as fast as we can. Let's retry as fast as we can. That's, I think, where we need to go, and that's I think, a lot more positive in the statement itself. And I completely agree with you. If I break all the rules, if I squeeze the last drop out of everybody, then it's a lot easier to be successful. Yeah, but that's not a world that most of us want to live in. Yeah? But anybody else want to? Yes.
Maybe I. Because here we are talking about what the European Commission can offer us, and we all hear it. However, I think that the important part to overtake that gap is to take it with us and bring to the local level, to the local market. So the example of such an action that we took in Łukasiewicz was the establishment of the industrial contact point, where we cooperate with Horizon Contact Point and National Contact Points, and we try to connect business, scientists and researchers, because sometimes they have great ideas, but they don't know where to look for in order to build a consortium. So that is something that we provide them. We train them how to build a consortium, how to write the proposals. And I think that in order to take advantage of those offers from the European Commission, we have to encourage our local market to take part in it. And another thing, because I wanted to get back that government part, because in Poland it is estimated that 67% of the spendings on R&D and innovation come from business, 32% come from the researchers and the universities, and only 1% come from the government. So it shows their approach, and I see a great potential in the solutions that European Commission is going to establish. I mean the GovTech incubators and that regional valleys, so we can show them that in the other region it works, so it will work in your city as well. So to encourage them to take actions and to spend money on investment and R&D.
If I may just pick up from just what you say and what you mentioned on these initiatives that indeed would be very helpful also for our stakeholders and also for us to, to work together and really to bring forward all the proposals for the regulations, legislation that we are coming through. But another thing what we are offering and what we are having potential for the national authorities, for example, to have a good use is this technical support instrument and public policy facilities that actually in here they also became a part of the new European innovation agenda, because here we're basically making an offer for the national authorities, just please come to us and identify your needs, and we would like to help you with the advice, with the expert advice, with the exchange of practices between the different member states, between the regions, because I think we could help by providing this sort of bird-eye view on the situation, and just maybe also to connect the dots. As already been said, these kind of events are tremendously important for us, for the stakeholders, for everyone around who are here in this room, because you hear already who is doing what and how, and if you are interested, you just follow up. Coming to this new European innovation agenda, maybe a little bit back, I mean, the success of it wouldn't be possible. The European Commission is just not able to ensure the success of this initiative if it wouldn't be for stakeholders to pick up, for the national, regional, local authorities to pick up, to identify the actions that they think that they could step in, they could promote, they could implement, because then only that could really ensure the success of this agenda. We need to multiply the effect, the leverage the effect of the actions that we are proposing, and many of these actions that are in the agenda that can be like really picked up on very, very local level, even like by universities, by innovation hub, by the accelerator, and just like try to replicate. I mean, there is no trademark on that, but just try to do very small initiative on your level, and then look for the ways to connect with other partners and scale it up. And I think that would be a success that we could bring together the success of this agenda.
Sure. Tuan, anything you want to add?
I think I have only one minor point to add to the innovation agenda that's actually mentioned in the text, but not yet heard. So I would like to emphasize the importance of talents and educations, because you cannot make innovation without the people behind it. I mean, that's why we have the master school program, we have the doctoral program to educate them not only in technical point. For example, in digital, we are not only educate the student to technical knowledge, but also entrepreneurship, business creation, and the digital talents for Europe. So that is, I'd like to emphasize that importance. So not only we have a strong network of ecosystem, a strong network of scale-up, startup, and accelerators, but also the schools that produce the talents for Europe and keep them here to build their business.
Yeah, schools, that's a tricky word. I have two young daughters that are 9 and 11, and sometimes when I look at the school system, it reminds me of when I went to school, and that was a long time ago. But as I said, this show is going to be full of surprises, and one of the surprises that we have is questions from the audience. So we have one: address active mobility. What about stronger nudging modal shift? Harold complained that he did not see enough walkers and cyclists. Shouldn't we invite them by reallocating space in cities? Doesn't say who this is addressed to, but
just be really honest here. Yes. Okay. So a good policy works. Okay. So that's what we've talked about. City authorities, anywhere where they've put in what we call the no-car zones. So you'll know from Barcelona, we have this thing called the super block. So it's like 3 blocks, so it's 9. And the traffic's not allowed anymore. They take back the street. And you can't go through this block. And it's sort of it truly, the first block my God, the noise, the campaigning, people were out screaming, you're going to destroy our local shops and we need our cars and everything. Then once it was there, my office was on that block and we would see all the signs and the demonstrations. And then within 2 months, it was all gone. Everybody who lived there loved it. And now Barcelona people are competing to get their block higher up the development list. So we've been conditioned to be car bases. But to make the change, it has to be a pleasant environment to cycle. It has to be a nice place to be. So we want proper government to turn around and say, if we want to reduce cycling, it's not enough to penalize people with payments and ultra-low emission zone. What's the positive thing? Why would they want to cycle? Will I make sure I separate my cycle lane from the car lane? So that's a huge difference when you physically separate the lane, the safety level, the perception of that, put in specific lights for the bicycle lanes. That makes a big difference. So it's not enough to say we're pro-bike. You have to put the money, and you probably do have to cut off the streets. That's going to happen, you know, and that's going to cause a problem. But no city who's implemented those measures afterwards have people complained and had to undo. Not at all. Okay.
Yeah.
So just remember that you need a political leader with a little bit of a backbone, stamina, and principle, and be ready to take the discussion to the citizens. But I mean, we want walking. We want bike. We need less cars. You know, it's a tough question. We have great car industries. We love them. They're great. They've contributed to our society and technology. We need to use them in other ways and give people jobs. But we do need to prioritize active walking and cycling. Yeah. So, tough move.
Very similar situation in Vienna. The main shopping street of Vienna used to have 2 lanes in both directions. Major chaos. It was the worst place to live because it was loud and polluted. Then about 10 years ago, the plans came up. We're going to take all the cars off, and I mean, the protests were immense. I mean, it was really like, you know, what do you mean you're taking our babies away? No, we're not taking your firstborn. We're just going to, you know, calm down this road. And now the businesses are happy. The side streets also want to have pedestrian areas now, so they don't want to have the cars anymore. And the most dangerous vehicle on that area right now is the cyclist. And they can be deadly. A guy on an e-bike, you know, weighing 70, 80 kilos, going 25 kilometers an hour. If there's a physicist in the room, they can calculate the mass of that. Yeah? If that decelerates quickly, that's a lot of impact. But it's completely changed the system, and nobody wants to go back. Yeah, and I think that's where there's a lot of stuff where we have to accept that just because we can't conceive of what it could possibly like, sometimes you just have to let go, let it happen, and the regional authority, whatever it is, has to have the stamina to pull through. I think that's a very valid point. Here we can, you know, shove it back to the regulators and say it's your problem, because we're not going to solve it on a technology issue. A follow-up question for Tuan. What innovation could enhance modal shift to active and sustainable transport? The modal shift towards sustainable transport. What innovation could improve that? I mean, do you think there's a single innovation? Do you think there's that it's a more complex system of innovations?
Well, I think to begin with, I do turn the question as another question to me, and then I will answer the question. So basically, for me, is that I think that when we talk, I start with a data word. For example, we talk about data science because it's a very, very popular right now in all areas. And when we organize the program, well, we have the statistic, we have artificial intelligence, it are tools behind that, mathematics behind that. And we have a very important part, I mean, in the program, it's domain knowledge. It's that when we want to apply, and how, where, and when to apply. And that's the domain knowledge that we need to understand first. What are the concerns? What are the customer pain points? For us, as a deep tech provider, we need to understand the pain points of the other areas. As we don't have that background on the, I mean, as a first-hand knowledge. That's why we, just to start with the ecosystem to find the solution for complex problem, I think that we kind of need a cross-training for each of us. I mean, on the one hand, we need to learn from your side to understand truly your concerns, the pain point as a customers, and on the other side, you can see that potentially you don't need to be an expert, but potentially what the other guy can provide to us. So that is, I think, that could be the core of the potential, if possible, a framework for collaborations and to solve the urban mobility challenge. So, for example, I understand customer behavior. I would say customer here, for example, pedestrians, how they move. I'm about to organize, to design a system for congestion control, for example. Mm-hmm. I need to understand what are the mobility things are there, pedestrians, cars, bikes coming together. So the system is complex. So I need inputs from urban mobility, and then I can use my knowledge to design and organize a framework to solve those problems. So that is a cross-sectoral, and it's a, I would say if your question is complex, yes, I would consider it complex. But as we start from the beginning to learn from each other, it will be less complex because we already know that. So that is my response.
Martina, you want to add something?
Yeah, I have a bit different view on that question, because I believe that we don't really need a very disruptive innovation in that case. However, we need an access. So that is something that you just said, because in Poznań, for example, I use car sharing and I use bike sharing because it's available. And I don't have to own my own car, which I don't. And I use public transport and other solutions that are available in the city. So, because innovations are already on the market, we just need to implement them and give the access for a good price to the pedestrians and drivers to use other modes of transport.
For me, it's also indeed a systemic approach what is important. It's really to make a concert of different type of innovation that's already available at the market and make it like work together for the benefits of the citizens. And I mean, I think this is incentives that are now a lot of cities are putting forward. For example, free transport, free trial electrical bike trial, that you could borrow the electrical bike and try it for a couple of months. I mean, this kind of small, really small gestures, they just really motivate citizens to try the new solutions and hopefully to adopt. And then again, I think one thing is for them to try and to start exploiting the new modes. And then, of course, it's to the municipalities, and it is for regional, national authorities to think indeed on the provision of the transport solutions, how we can make them more green, more smart. Then indeed it should be really these political choices that should be done. So it's really from one side it's really political choices, and from other side is working with the citizens and informing the citizens of different opportunities that are available and make them also easy to use, friendly to use. And I think it just really comes also from your experience. The more you try, I mean, if they are accessible, if information is there, if it's easy to start using, then you adopt the new patterns, the new behaviors, and then you just like really, and then also from your side, you will be making steps, and you also will push the governments to make the city more adaptable to solutions that you have chosen.
I fully agree that access and trial is the way forward. I could never imagine driving an e-bike until I bought one, and now I love it. It's the best thing. I can go across Vienna, literally. I live on one end of Vienna, and I've biked to the other side, recharged and biked back, and I would never have thought of taking a bike there. And same with car sharing, you know? I mean, who doesn't want to go to the bar in a car? But nobody wants to drive home. Yeah? And then the logistics in the morning were always a nightmare back in the 90s. There's a question also to you, Martina. What do you think will be the big innovation topics in the urban mobility context in the next years? Where will the innovation
So maybe I will go to my local market, as I said, so that parcel lockers, once again, because from the perspective that we want to, that we have that shared economy, we want that, we want to cut the costs. So I believe that, and we already have such a good example of the company that wants to cooperate with us, and we are going to write a proposal on that and develop that idea of the shared parcel lockers. So because now in Poland we also just have one company that is operating all the machines, and we want to open them and give them the solutions, the AI solutions that will help them to share those lockers, because we believe that more and more couriers are going to establish their own parcel lockers, and we don't want it, because we don't want our city to be crowded with the new machines, because we believe that we can share our own facility that we and infrastructure that we already have. So I think that that is something that will be disruptive, and from the perspective of the last mile deliveries will give a great impact.
That's a really interesting approach, because basically what you're saying is you're taking what somebody's selling as a novel technology and saying that shouldn't be a novel technology, this should be an infrastructure, and infrastructure needs to be provided by governmental agencies in what shape or form. And that's the first time I've actually heard an approach like that, and I really like it, because it opens up a lot of opportunities for then smaller operators to get into games where the high investment cost is keeping them out.
Because they came up with the idea that's quite innovative, that now there are some parcels that we operate with our cell phones, only with the apps, so they don't have any display. So the electricity that the machine needs is much lower, so we also care about CO2 emission.
And it's a lot easier to set up, because you can probably do it with a solar panel or some, you don't need a cable and everything.
Yeah.
That's really cool innovations going on that I'm not completely unaware of, actually. And that sort of brings me to the last question that we have from the audience, to you, Gareth. What are some examples of EIT innovation projects in urban public transport?
Okay, so, wow, we have lots. So,
We've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So, let's talk about micromobility, shared mobility for a start. So we are currently testing, you know, right now we have lots of different companies that are flooding the market with bikes. They all have to have different parking locations, or they're left on the street. It's been the Wild West. So we're having to step up a little bit and be seen. So we're funding a project which will look to have recharging points that are connected already with solar. It's either, so it's tiles like you have on the floor that actually means you don't need to dig up to put a new charging point in. You just install the device with the base, which takes sunshine, and it makes electricities. But of course, some days it's a little cloudy. We've got some batteries in the back just in case. And so we don't need to dig up the road. We don't need to make a mess, but we can actually find charging points. So that's one area we're working in. Another one, we're looking at bicycle safety and nudge policies. So we're working with a company in Italy who we've now been demonstrating. In Italy, they had a reasonable market. Our project took them to 3 other countries where they didn't exist and got them 500 people to test it. And it's working with reward cards. So Istanbul, fabulous city, they have the Istanbul card. You use it for transport, etc. But now if you use your bike and it's registering, you get points. And points means prizes and actual money that you can go and use for coffee. So it's a nudge cycle, and you can have competitions, and it's driving on an existing technology, which was the Istanbul card, additional value for cycling. Now, anybody who ever cycled in Istanbul deserves a prize, never mind a coffee, okay, because God bless them. But it's also in Portugal, it's in Italy, I think we're doing it in Riga as well. So that's the type of thing. Good European companies from one country, we're giving a leg up and putting into other countries. So the Spanish company, where we have lots of sun, is also being tested in 3 other countries, okay? And that's specifically mobility and modal shift.
I think that's a really nice way to wrap up today's session. Thank you very much to all of our speakers and presenters. It was great having you here. I hope I didn't, bother you too much with my questions, but that they were a little bit fun. Again, thank you to the audience for being here, and we're literally looking what's ahead on the road for us and see where this road takes us. Thank you very much for your participation. Don't forget, there's the Urban Mobility Days next door, but only if you signed up and have a badge do you get to go there. So, thank you very much. Have a great day.